Reason is a slave of the passions.
That was David Hume's view, yeah. I mean, yeah, do you want to know my problem with Hume's? I had a radical conversion. This might not be connected, it's not connected to panpsychism, but I had a radical conversion. I used to have a more humane view when I was a graduate student, but I was persuaded by some professors at the University of Reading, where I was, that if you have the humane view, you have to say any basic life goals are equally valid. So, for example, let's take someone whose basic goal in life is counting blades of grass, right? And crucially, they don't enjoy it, right? This is the crucial point. They get no pleasure from it. That's just their basic goal, to spend their life counting as many blades of grass as possible. Not for some greater goal, that's just their basic goal. I want to say that is objectively stupid. That is objectively pointless. I shouldn't say stupid, maybe. It's objectively pointless in a way that pursuing pleasure or pursuing someone else's pleasure or pursuing scientific inquiry is not pointless. As soon as you make that admission, you're not a follower of David Hume anymore. You think there are objective facts about what goals are worth pursuing.
Is it possible to have a goal without pleasure? So this kind of idea that you disjoint the two. So the David Foster Wallace idea of, the key to life is to be unboreable. Isn't it possible to discover the pleasure in everything in life? The counting of the blades of grass. Once you see the mastery, the skill of it, you can discover the pleasure. Therefore, I guess what I'm asking is why and when and how did you lose the romance in grad school of life? Is that what you're trying to say?
I think it may or may not be true that it's possible to find pleasure in everything. But I think it's also true that people don't act solely for pleasure, and they certainly don't act solely for their own pleasure. People will suffer for things they think are worthwhile. I might suffer for some scientific cause, for finding out a cure for the pandemic, or and in terms of my own pleasure, I might have less pleasure in doing that, but I think it's worthwhile. It's a worthwhile thing to do. I just don't think it's the case that everything we do is rooted in maximizing our own pleasure. I don't think that's even psychologically plausible.
But pleasure, then that's a narrow kind of view of pleasure. That's like a short-term pleasure. But you can see pleasure as a kind of ability to hear the music in the distance. It's like, yes, it's difficult now, it's suffering now, but there's some greater thing beyond the mountain that will be joy. I mean, that's kind of even if it's not in this life, well, the warriors will meet in Valhalla, right? The feeling that gives meaning and fulfillment to life is not necessarily grounded in pleasure of like the counting of the grass. It's something else. I don't know. The struggle is a source of deep fulfillment. So like, I think pleasure needs to be kind of thought of as a little bit more broadly. It just kind of gives you this sense. It for a moment allows you to forget the terror of the fact that you're going to die. That's pleasure. Like that's the broader view of pleasure, that you get to kind of play in the little illusion that all of this has deep meaning. That's pleasure.
Yeah, well, but I mean, people sacrifice their lives. Atheists may sacrifice their lives for the sake of someone else or for the sake of something important enough. And clearly in that case, they're not doing it for the sake of their own pleasure. That's a rather dramatic example, but there can be just trivial examples where, I choose to be honest rather than lie about something. And I lose out a bit and I have a bit less pleasure, but I thought it was worth doing the honest thing or something. I mean, I just think, so maybe you can use the word pleasure so broadly that you're just essentially meaning something worthwhile, but then I think the word pleasure maybe loses its meaning.
Sure. Well,
but what do you think about the blades of grass case? What do you think about someone who spends their life counting blades of grass and doesn't enjoy it.
So I personally think it's impossible, or maybe I'm not understanding even like the philosophical formulation, but I think it's impossible to have a goal and not draw pleasure from it. Make it worthwhile, forget the word pleasure. I think the word goal loses meaning. If I say I'm going to count the number of pens on this table, if I'm actively involved in the task, I will find joy in it. I will find, I think there's a lot of meaning and joy to be discovered in the skill of a task, in mastering of a skill, and in taking pride in doing it well. I mean, I don't know what it is about the human mind, but there's some joy to be discovered in the mastery of a skill. So I think it's just impossible to count blades of grass and not sort of have the Jiro dreams of sushi compelling, like draws you into the mastery of the simple task.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, in a way, you might think it's just hard to imagine someone who would spend their lives doing that. But then maybe that's just because it's so evident that is a pointless task. Whereas if we take this David Hume view seriously, it ought to be, a totally possible life goal. Whereas, I guess I just find it hard to shake the idea that some ways of some life goals are more worthwhile than others. And it doesn't mean, that there's one single way you should lead your life, but pursuing knowledge, helping people, pursuing your own pleasure to an extent are worthwhile things to do in a way that, for example, I'm a little bit OCD. I still feel inclined to walk on cracks in the pavement or do it symmetrically. Like if I step on a crack with my left foot, I feel the need to do it with my right foot. And I think that's kind of pointless. It's something I feel the urge to do, but it's pointless. Whereas other things I choose to do, I think it's worth doing. And it's hard to make sense of metaphysically. What could possibly ground that? How could we know about these facts? But that's the starting point for me.
I don't know. I think you walking on the sidewalk in a way that's symmetrical brings order to the world. Like if you weren't doing that, the world might fall apart. And
it feels like that.
And I think there's meaning in that. Like you embracing the full experience of that, you living the richness of that as if it has meaning, will give meaning to it. And then whatever genius comes of that, as you as a one little intelligent ant, will make a better life for everybody else. Perhaps I'm defending the blades of grass example because I can literally imagine myself enjoying this task as somebody who's OCD in a certain kind of way and quantitative.
But now you're ruining the example because you imagine someone enjoying it. I'm imagining someone who doesn't enjoy it. We don't want a life that's just full of pleasure, like we just sit there, having a big sugar high all the time. We want a life where we do things that are worthwhile. If for something to be worthwhile just is for it to be a basic life goal, then that mode of reflection doesn't really make sense. We can't really think, did I do things worthwhile? On the David Hume type picture, all it is for something to be worthwhile is it was a basic goal of yours or derived from a basic goal. And yeah.
I mean, I think goal and worthwhile aren't. I think goal is a boring word. I'm more sort of existential. It's like, did you ride the roller coaster of life? Did you fully experience life? And in that sense, I mean, the blades of grass is something that could be deeply joyful. And that's, in that way, I think suffering could be joyful in the full context of life. It's the roller coaster of life. Like without suffering, without struggle, without pain, without depression or sadness, there's not the highs. I mean, that's a fucked up thing about life is that the lows really make the highs that much richer and deeper and like taste better, right? I tweeted this. I couldn't sleep and I was like late at night. And I know it's like an obvious statement, but like every love story eventually, ends in loss, in tragedy. So like this feeling of love at the end, there's always going to be tragedy, even if it's the most amazing lifelong love with another human being. One of you is going to die, and I don't know which is worse, but both are not going to be pretty. And so that the sense that it's finite, the sense that it's going to end in a low, that gives like richness to those kind of evenings when you realize this fucking thing ends. This thing ends. The feeling that it ends, that bad taste, that bad feeling that it ends, gives meaning, gives joy, gives I don't know, pleasure is this loaded word, but gives some kind of deep pleasure to the experience when it's good.
Mm.
And I mean, and that's the blades of grass. They have that to me. But you're perhaps right that it's like reducing it to set of goals or something like that is kind of removing the magic of life. Because I think what makes counting the blades of grass joyful is it's just because it's life.